All right, it's Wednesday. You guys know the deal. It is a best ball breakfast doubleheader. First up, a draft with the defending Best Ball Mania champ, that is Pat Kerrane. We'll be talking through a recent article he wrote for Legendary Upside and hopping, of course, in a Best Ball Mania IV Draft, chasing that $3 million up top. And then immediately following that, in the second block, we'll have Shawn Siegele coming by. Last week, he made you guys all riddled with anxiety as we ran down the clock before all of our selections. It will be a blast. As always, will we avoid the wide receiver avalanches today? We're going to find out. It's Best Ball Breakfast. Let's go.
Oh, another Influencer 101 for the backward hats, bro. Rigged!
Zach Ertz with no Tyler Algier bringback? Yikes.
You reached around for correlation?
That's a no-no. You ADP bros disgust me. How about you just live a little?
Handcuffing might actually be a way to get unique if the field's avoiding it.
The Wi-Fi at this resort is a disaster?
These fucking streamers don't have player takes.
What if a piss boy draft is the room you need?
Oh! All right, we are back. Pat, I got my document, my Word doc open where I'm starting to add some terms, getting ready to at least start scripting the Best Ball Bro for 2023.
I love it. I mean, I thought, we'd kind of like, maybe we were termed out after last year. There's so many good terms last year, but I feel like this year we're just terms are flying in left and right.
I know. And I'm going to have to scroll through. I just read your new mega opus up there. I would say it's the second longest best ball piece of the year, right behind Leone's manifesto. So I'll have to crawl through there and see if I can find any phrases.
I think there's definitely some fodder in there for you. I think you're going to have a few things to hit on there.
Awesome. Well, we are off to the races in a Best Ball Mania draft. Last week, Pat and I got CMC to start from the middle of the round. We have the Influencer 112 today, Pat. So we will be making back-to-back picks here. I shotgun started this draft on you guys, but I did tip off the YouTube members there in the Best Ball Breakfast channel and Deposit Discord. You guys got the ping. So it looks like we do have some friends and family in this draft. Pat, what kind of clip have you been drafting at since we last talked? I noticed this is literally my 10th draft since the last time we drafted last Wednesday.
So I've had some chow chows and bulldogs, and I somehow still have a slow poodle left. I've got those all going slow. Mm-hmm. And then I've been drafting some on DraftKings, and I've done some Best Ball Manias. I did the other day, I did 3 Best Ball Manias in a day. Just kind of felt like the water was warm. So I was enjoying it. But yeah, I haven't been drafting a ton of Best Ball Mania still. I'm up to 19 Best Ball Mania drafts. Okay.
So is that, I mean, I know you've been working on some of the DraftKings stuff. Is that a purposeful thing to keep more of these in the chamber? You don't want to quite hop in your time machine too much in Best Ball Mania?
Yeah, I'm waiting to hop in the time machine. The time machine takes you to week 17, so you can hop in it in August too. It's not just a June time machine, but it's kind of like I've been wanting to save some of the bullets for a little later. I think starting this week though, I'll kind of start to fire a little bit more regularly because I don't want to have too many for the late part.
Right. All right, we are on the clock here. CeeDee Lamb goes. No CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, St. Brown. We do have the legendary upside ranks uploaded here. Bijan Robinson, Davante Adams, JT, Amon-Ra, Jalen Waddle. What stands out?
I mean, Bijan at 112 seems really nice.
Yeah, he went at 117 in my Monday draft. So he's falling in these rooms. I'm definitely down to do a Bijan. Probably should grab one wide receiver with him, though.
Yeah, and I'm fine with whichever wide receiver you'd want.
Yeah. Do you have any concern with the Davante Adams stuff? I'm starting to hear about him falling in drafts. I don't either.
I think the Jimmy G stuff is just smoke. I mean, I read this piece by Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap, and he was like, this has been in his contract the whole time. This is not we didn't know about this, and it's being treated like they added this and it's this amendment. And no, they can cut it. It's not wrong. They can cut him if he's not healthy and stuff, but it's not like they are scrambling and now It's just that he signed a contract that doesn't have a floor.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and I guess, then you also have to deal with the fact that Adams is looking at this situation and he's like, what are we serious? Is this really what we're going into? But I mean, I think Josh Jacobs is, in a weird way, shouldn't Josh Jacobs be falling? He's not under contract. He said he's not going to sign he's not going to sign the tender unless like the Raiders, I think he said he was open to signing his franchise tag tender if the Raiders improve the offense this offseason.
Yeah.
And now he's not signing the tender.
Yeah. And this is the other thing too. People are acting like Davante Adams is losing, Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. He's losing Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he went off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns with Jarrett Stidham last year in a game against the Niners, one of the best defenses in football. So it's like, I don't know. I'm not too worried about Davante Adams with the whole situation. I don't know. I mean, the floor is already pretty low with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah. Also, but I mean, he was doing that with Derek Carr.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, it can't get much worse, and he's produced within all of those different environments.
Right. Exactly. Pointing out in the chat that Barkley hasn't signed the tag either. I think that's something to note as well. I mean, maybe not a reason to like freak out about Barkley, but it's not ideal.
Yeah. All right. Taking
middle of the first round. As much as I love Austin Eckler, I'm not really on board with that.
You know what? It's our guy, John Warner here, definitely getting unique. I would say in a piss boy or best ball breakfast room, an Eckler Barkley start is always going to be very unique. I'm trying to see, we also have a CMC JT start. The rest of this board looks fairly commonplace. You're seeing Hurts go to the one team a lot. KZ Brown setting up the premium double with Jamar Chase and T Higgins. Yeah, fairly normal draft room, I'd say so far.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Miles, you want a coffee pour? I'll give you a coffee pour.
I want the coffee pour at this point, man.
I know.
Why do you think I'm here?
Yeah, it's.
Does Shawn get the coffee pour? Or is it just me?
Well, normally I'm out by the time Shawn is on, but we'll see if I can save a little. Yeah, I bet April's been getting up fairly early these days. So the coffee is generally long gone. And then I have to make what I call a content pot of coffee just for the people in the ASMR freaks out there.
And then are you what you call content wired the rest of the day?
Yeah, exactly. It's really just a bad trickle down effect on everything here. Come on, guys. Everyone knows that we feed the ducks in the second show after I forget and you guys remind me. All right, Pat, we're heading here to our picks at the 3-4 turn. We started with Bijan Robinson, Davante Adams. We got Josh Allen following all the way to 3-9. Yeah. Look at JGFC get that Allen Devonta start.
Good for you, JGFC. Look what he did. He did the Devonta Smith. I wrote about you guys don't know this because I haven't published it yet, but I just finished an article that's going to be out soon. I wrote about that start. You give yourself 2 elite outs.
Yep.
2 outs.
I think I have a best ball tip video coming about that as well tomorrow. So it's happening now. Basically, my thought is you can't take elite quarterbacks in round 2 anymore because 1, they're falling, and now there's going to be way too many of these combos where people are getting your same team, but with a guy snuck in there.
Yeah.
All right, man, I'm personally freaked out about like the Hopkins stuff. I understand your closing line value argument on him. Anything else that you see here that you like?
Well, I guess we should probably grab one of these 2 running backs, so we could do that. Unless you want to grab 2 receivers. Where's your head at?
I haven't done a lot of ETN. Let's just grab him and then get a receiver here. This will get us on. Yeah, go ahead.
What are you worried is going to happen with Hopkins? To me, I'm like, if he goes to the Browns, I like him here. If he goes to the Chiefs, he's like a round 2 low. Mm-hmm. Even if he went to the Texans, I feel like, all right, now he's probably like a mid 4th or maybe a 5th round value. But I don't know. I would take him in the late 4th if he was on the Texans even. I
guess I just prefer like Keenan straight up to him if I'm making that kind of like veteran wide receiver play.
All right, we can take Keenan.
No, but I want the, if I have the legendary upside ranks in here, I need to be pushed outside of my comfort zone. I would say this start is one that I don't do a lot. But yeah, talk a little bit more about Hopkins because like my thought has been that this ADP here is already assuming like a Chiefs or Bills or whatever, a nut top 7 offense landing spot. And you're saying even if he goes to like the Texans or the Browns or whatever, you think that he's going to move up from here?
No, I don't think he'll move. If he goes to the Browns, I don't think he'll move up. But I don't think I think he's a lot more interesting than Amari Cooper. If they're both on the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who's got the long-term connection with Deshaun Watson. And I mean, Amari Cooper seemed to have a better connection with Jacoby Brissett really than Watson. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think he's probably fairly priced if he's on the Browns. He was good last year. Nuke was good last year. So I'm not feeling like he's in like a major decline. I was a little bit worried about that after 2021. But the big reason to take him is like, what if he does sign with the Chiefs? Sounds like the Bills is a long shot. But if he signs with the Chiefs, like there's no way he's going to the end of the 3rd round or the early 4th round. There's just no way. Kadarius Toney is like a 7th round pick because he's on the Chiefs.
Yeah. No, he would settle in right next to and probably ahead of DK Metcalf, I think is where his ADP would settle. I still think underdog drafters would take T Higgins ahead of him and then grab DeAndre on the Chiefs.
I think so too. Yeah. I think he would be behind T Higgins, but ahead of Metcalf for sure.
Yeah. All right, KZ. This is one of those spots where it depends if you have a guy you really like. So he had the Jamar Chase T Higgins start, comes back around. The team from the one hole already took Jalen Hurts. Very, very unlikely they take an unstacked Joe Burrow. There, do you just make your other selection you prefer, or do you risk Joe Burrow coming back to you? I guess if it depends if you have something on the board that you think is too good to pass up.
And he had to scroll up. Sorry, he had
Jamar Chase T Higgins. What I'm saying is he could easily wait.
You take Mixon first. You take Mixon first.
Yeah, but you get.
I think that's easy. It's easy. You take Mixon first because the odds that he takes Mixon are much higher than the odds that he takes Burrow, and you're trying to set up this Bengals super stack anyway.
Yeah, I will say the non-badge though, it does give you a little pause. You're like,
yeah, it's happened.
Crazy.
It has happened. I've seen people double up.
So let's think through this. We're about to pick here at the 5-6 turn. We got a 2 running back, 2 wide receiver start. I think this is where we have to really think through. If we did a detour, it would obviously be for an elite tight end because we're going to have Pitts or Goddard available here. That would give us then 3 wide receivers, assuming we take one with pick 61, and then wondering in this room. I think we
need to go wide receiver.
That's what I was just talking through because I think in this room at pick 84, I could see Rashad Bateman gone by this pick.
It's going to be really bad by the end of the 7th round.
So I'm trying to see if we of course have the veterans who I'm already overweight.
I would do Burks here if you want to get a little weird.
Yeah.
And then we could do like Lockett and Burks or Evans and Burks or, one of those kind of like more comfy.
Let's do
be out there dudes.
Let's do a Lockett. One thing just to help break that tie is because we are going to be looking at a mid to late round quarterback build, starting to break ties in favor of a quarterback that could help us there in Geno. And then
I think that makes a lot of sense.
You could also do the same thing with Addison, I guess, if you wanted. But man, Burks is such a fun pick too. What do you think?
I like Burks. I mean, Burks is someone I want to be in on this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of saying that I think Quentin Johnston's ADP should be much closer to Jordan Addison's, and I think Burks is going to eventually flip Addison as well, especially if we keep getting these training camp pieces from him.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to like how gross are the Titans, because they're going to be bad, but are they like a Falcons sort of operation where they're like just trying not to get embarrassed, or are they trying to go out there and score some points?
Yeah,
and if they're out there trying to score points, I think Burks could have a huge year. If they're the Falcons, then he could have a 45% market share and be like a wide receiver 3.
I think that is interesting too, where I'd almost argue this range, knowing like underdog drafters, right? I always think back to, what was it, 2 years ago when we all got excited about Brandon Ayuk and we were drafting him at like the back end of the 4th round. And then that was the Debo year or whatever. Like Treylon Burks is a prototypical underdog drafter target. Like we collectively like this guy. To me, this ADP bakes in just complete quarterback uncertainty. Whereas if we do happen to get 17 games from Ryan Tannehill, or if you told the market you were going to get 17 games from Tannehill, Burks would be going for sure in this range with like Judy and Mike Williams and Drake London.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's where I would be. I'd be happy to take him there if we knew we were going to get 17 games from Tannehill. If maybe like Derrick Henry was also like 27, instead of 29,
Yeah.
I'd feel better about Burks because I think you do want the offense. Like the Titans offense is a very specific offense. Play action. They actually like establish the run. It's like an effective old school NFL offense where they can actually kind of establish the run and then pass off the run as opposed to, using the pass to set up the run like a lot of modern NFL offenses.
Yeah.
But that could be really hurt if Derrick Henry isn't who he's been, and every year he gets, year older he gets, it gets tougher to bet on that. So that makes me a little nervous. And then obviously Will Levis could totally suck.
Definitely. Let me catch up on the chat here a little bit. Rick has, how do you get the red exposure percentages on underdog like that? I'm using my friend Brian Hooper's draft caddy. You can go to brick75.com. I have a link down in the show notes, and you can tweak and get whatever kind of information you want up there. I have my exposures and week 16, week 17 matchup. That link is down below. You can also hit me up on Discord if you have questions. Matthew Underwood, the teams y'all draft together, if they win, do y'all split the money? Yes, this isn't an FAQ that I did write for all of my drafts. Anyone who drafts with me on the stream, even multimillionaires who won Best Ball Mania 3. Maybe if Pat and I win, I kind of just disappear. I go rogue. I head down to the Cayman Islands, whatever. But theoretically,
That'd be a sad way to end the friendship, Pete.
Yeah. But then they could make a movie about it. I could be Bankman.
I would actually,
a great time.
That would be a fun movie. I have to say, we all get together. We're just like, oh man, it just didn't.
Yeah,
just the documentary. Get Leone. The kitchen interview would be amazing.
Yeah. JGFC win pizza party. Pat is going for the ship chasing community. Will be out in Vegas right before the start of the season, doing some season long drafts out there. And Kerrane has promised a pizza party for the chasers.
I have promised a pizza party. Yeah, I need to look into that. Actually, we're getting close enough. I need to start setting that up.
Yeah,
there's a legendary pizza in New York, and I was trying to figure out if there's a legendary pizza in Vegas. That would obviously be top of the list.
That's fun. I did want to point out one other interesting thing as I look at the one drafter here who took Jalen Hurts at 24 and then passed twice on Dallas Goedert at the 6-7 turn. That seemed interesting to me there.
KZ, I take it back. You did the right thing. This guy's a wild card.
Yeah, exactly. Nate says he saw Pat's Rojo song for the first time yesterday. It changed my life. Yeah, Edwin Portis resurfaced that one on Twitter, and it is a great song. It's also
I saw some people. It was Edwin who resurfaced it. I saw a couple people had retweeted it. And I was like, how is this getting retweeted today?
All right, Pat, we are on the clock here.
Trevor Lawrence would make sense for us with ETN, and then we could backdoor him with Zay Jones if you wanted.
Yeah, I was
Zay Jones, but.
And I mean, we could also see if Evan Ingram gets pushed to not this pick, but the next one.
Right.
I like the Lawrence call. I think both of us have found his ADP to be a little bit rich, but we're getting him 20 picks past ADP, correlated with the big bet we've made. And then this is still looking very much like a running back tier, unless you want to do something with Michael Thomas or Sutton.
I don't. I mean, Pacheco here would be fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind Rashad White either.
Let's do Pacheco.
Yeah, getting a little more ADP value there.
Yeah. And now, we're in a similar spot that we were last week. I think probably 4 wide receivers through this many rounds as well. And we'll have to find a couple other options.
It's actually hard not to only have 4 wide receivers through this round. Like I struggle to get to 5 unless I'm just like, I'm passing on Bijan at the 112. I'm getting 2 receivers.
Yeah.
It's actually difficult for me to get to 5. I mean, much less 6 receivers with these 80. There's just a lot of detours right now that are pretty appealing. But then if you end up with just 3, like I'm like, oh,
yeah,
this team's dead.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
It
is. I mentioned this with Spags on Splash Play yesterday that, I haven't been getting a lot of the Pacheco, Akers, Dameon Pierce. I got my first JK Dobbins share just for that same reason. Like I'm always taking wide receiver in that range and being like, I do want to, as much as we all like the 3rd round running back values, I do want to take some Metcalf and Debo and whatever in that range and then get an anchor running back in the 5th or 6th round, especially why these running back prices still exist. Today in the Fantasy Life newsletter, Dwayne wrote up Joe Mixon and Alexander Madison being, 2 prime targets to help you embrace the wide receiver avalanche, essentially, of having your cake and eating it too, with potentially 2 lead backs. So I want to make sure I am, flipping the game theory optimal build to make sure I'm getting access to other pockets of the draft board.
What are your thoughts on Madison? Because I was listening to the RotoWorld podcast, and they were talking about how like Madison still had a lot of room to move up, and that's one where I've just been like, I feel like him moving up past like the 7th round just kind of makes me queasy. Maybe to the 6th, I guess, but like I don't think he's very good. Like I know he can do everything, but like he's not, I don't think, very talented. Like he's kind of, I don't know, like he's sort of a David Montgomery type of dude.
You know what he reminds me of? Like the move up, it reminds me of, and not quite exactly because it's not an injury and this has been more of a slow burn, but it reminds me of the Darrell Henderson jump a couple years ago where he obviously has to move up. Market's going to market, top of the depth chart, projectable volume, yada, yada. He has to move up. But Dwayne McBride and or Ty Chandler are going to be involved. And he just doesn't seem like, it seems like it'd be a fine pick, but still just a super dead zone-y pick there. So I think I'm on the same page with you with that.
Yeah, he becomes like a quintessential dead zone back where it's like, they said that he's getting everything. And it's like, well, he's never really been efficient. He can do everything. He's definitely versatile, but like, yeah, Mike Davis is another guy kind of comes to mind. I think he's probably better than Mike Davis at that point in their careers. But, these backs who aren't like that talented, it makes them susceptible to losing touches throughout the course of the year. Like you can't like, this isn't just like we pencil him in, you can't just like write it in ink that he's going to get like an 80% snap share or whatever. If he sucks, that's not going to happen. Even if he's not very good, that's not going to happen. McBride's kind of an interesting 2-down guy. Chandler seems to have some, interest on the team. Like, so there's been some good reports on him. So
yeah. Let's see here. Mike is shocked that Elijah Moore went in the top 80. I don't think that's because of actual steam. I think that's a wide receiver avalanche room. Also, Nolan up here saying this room is disgusting. I'm never drafting with you guys again. I don't know why anyone would want to draft in these rooms. I'm legally obligated to complete my 150 challenge, but you guys have no excuses for willingly hopping in these draft rooms. So Pat, this is an interesting spot here. I do not think Geno will come back on the wrap. If we do want to be done at quarterback, but that also means taking him over a guy like Dak Prescott.
I'm fine with that. I mean, we have them stacked. Like, it's fine to take Geno, I think. What do we do? Oh, you know what we could do? We could take Freiermuth, which is a bring back.
I was just going to say that because I don't think taking another running back here makes sense. We're definitely in the middle of a wide receiver dead zone here. I say we take care of other positions.
Yeah.
Because now we're done at quarterback with Trevor Lawrence and Geno Smith. We got Trevor Lawrence with ETN. We got Geno with Lockett, Pat Freiermuth on the bring back. And now we need to roll up our sleeves and find some wide receivers.
Yeah, we'll probably take Zay Jones on the next turn, who I don't like taking, but gives us and there's no real like true backdoor options with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you handle, because I've been in that spot a few times. I forget what it was. I think it was another draft where He ended up going one pick before, but I had, the Chase or Higgins start, and I'm sitting there, setting up my Burrow. And then Lamar Jackson almost makes it back to me. And it's like Lamar Jackson is a sick value in the late fourth. And yet, do you pass on the stack? You don't want to take both Lamar and Joe Burrow at the 4-5 turn necessarily. Like, how do you handle those spots when there's an objectively in a vacuum better quarterback ahead, but you're not actually getting the stacking benefit?
I think if it's Lamar, I'd probably just take Lamar. Like
Yeah.
Lamar can get there. Burrow can have huge games, obviously, too, but like it's going to be pretty unique to have those guys together. You could also like Chase could be the guy you need, and then Lamar could like keep you even enough with Burrow. Like Burrow could be like the guy who you'd rather have, but maybe Lamar blows up in week 15 or 16, and that's the reason you get to week 17 in the first place or something. So
yeah,
given just how high upside Lamar is, given that he's easily stackable later in the draft, I think it's kind of the thing I wrote about in the article about sniping my quarterbacks. Like, if you're really going to take down a field of 441 people, like you're going to need to get a few things right, not just one stack. And so having the Bengals go off, even if you don't have Burrow, is awesome for you because you have the Bengals receivers. And then maybe Lamar goes off too, and you've got him stacked since he's easily backdoor stackable with 3 different wide receiver options. And you can even tack one on Isaiah Likely. Like,
yeah,
you can bet big on Lamar, and he's got the rushing. It's just a number of ways where that can work, I think.
Yep. I do really want to pull up this comment. So Chipsy says, address the fact that Pacheco is the definition of a dead zone back. He is inherently not the definition of a dead zone back based on where he's going. This is an 8th round price. This is the Josh Jacobs price last year, where Josh Jacobs falls out of the dead zone, is now at the tip of the 0 RB selections, along with Dalvin, Rashad White, James Cook, David Montgomery. The issue is when this back is traditionally going in the 5th and 6th round. These are the prototypical red zone or dead zone backs: Damian Pierce, Miles Sanders, Kenneth Walker, JK Dobbins.
And even in the 7th, they get a little queasy. Like I'm saying, like Alexander Madison. Now I'm starting to be like, But yeah, Pacheco I don't take a ton of, but I would say I think you're right. I think he is sort of a quintessential dead zone back. We're not that sure about the talent level. He's more of a 2-down guy. It's probably split backfield, but we took him in the 801. So that's one of the interesting things about drafts right now.
Yep. Yeah. And I just think, the whole start of the 0 RB range is always going to be backs that are in committees, that are rookies, that are handcuffs, that there's a wart on their profile. Not if they didn't have anyone ahead of them, they would be Bijan Robinson and they'd be going in the 1st and 2nd round. So, we are on the clock. Did see a wide receiver run go there. I feel like we definitely need to be taking Mingo. And then I'm curious
into Mingo, yeah.
What else you would be? Do we just take Alec Pierce, a guy I have a lot of?
Did Zay Jones go? I never take him. So
Zay Jones went. Yeah, it was frustrating.
Yeah, Pierce seems kind of great.
Yeah.
We need the wide receiver help.
I'm just making sure if there's anything else here. I mean, you do have Eli Mitchell sliding past ADP, but we're gonna have other running backs we like.
We're gonna have guys we like.
Yeah, let's lock up Pierce. I've been drafting him a lot, which is interesting because I'm so light on Anthony Richardson, but man, I still do really like the Alec Pierce price tag right there.
Get on board, dude. Just get on board with Richardson.
Yeah. Guys, I think what you guys are getting, you guys are getting confused with the dead zone back. There's 2 arguments happening here. You are saying guys who are at risk of not having as much projectable volume as the market thinks. That's true about these guys.
You're right about that part.
You're right about that part. The dead zone has to do specifically with price. Running backs that you select in the 8th round are not dead zone running backs. That's when you're starting to take 0 RB selection.
I mean, I guess it's sort of a semantic thing. Like, I guess you could say they are dead zone running backs, but they've fallen outside the dead zone. So,
exactly.
So yeah, sure. He's a dead zone running back, but what happens when you get a dead zone running back in the 8th round instead of the 6th round? And I think the answer there is your bet is now weighted a lot more towards the upside, even though it's a low floor bet, right? Pacheco could totally suck this year. I don't know what else they're doing. I guess they could sign some, they could sign Fournette or something. And, they could sign Zeke. There's any number of ways where Pacheco could look a lot less interesting. But the floor is as low as it would be in the 6th round. But the ceiling is now, not that it's higher, but it can really hit your lineup in a much more powerful way because your wide receivers are pretty strong. You didn't have to pass on a 6th round wide receiver to get a running back. The wide receiver in the 8th round was who would we have even taken?
Well, I think the terminology, and I will help you guys so you can involve this debate. And it coincidentally is something coined and popularized by Ben Gretsch when talking about the dead zone. What you guys are referring to generally are trap backs. And a lot of the guys like Isaiah Pacheco, and that refers to guys who don't catch a lot of passes and they do a lot of their work between the tackles in the non-high value areas of the field. And guys like Pacheco and Dameon Pierce and JK Dobbins, those guys have trap-esque profiles. And that's what you're saying. They're trap backs based on their overall talent profile. But
they're not going to get the red zone touches. Yeah. They're not going to get the green zone touches, score a lot of touchdowns, and they don't catch passes. So it's just
exactly
low value between the 20 rushes.
Yeah, trap backs, but dead zone has to refer to price when we're talking about dead zone. Roto Run mentioning something that I thought was interesting too. John saying Pierce, a pretty polarizing player between your ranks and ETR, one of the biggest deltas, 40 spots in difference there. I took a Dameon Pierce share like 20 spots past ADP. Talk about a Pierce here as we head to the 13-14 turn.
Let's talk about our pick. And I'll get
yeah.
Because the Bigsby just went. That's a bummer. And we can't take Algier because we already have.
You would have been down to Hancock, ETN, and Bigsby.
Oh, I forgot that we had ETN, to be honest. I was just thinking Lawrence.
Yeah.
No, I didn't want a Hancock.
Yeah. So I do think we are going to need to take a wide receiver here.
I thought you had clicked on the wide receiver button because it looks like it's highlighted.
Yeah.
And it's still just showing running backs and quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this really is a Pittsburgh draft.
Let's see here. So Dulcich is sliding past ADP. I mean, I'm kind of willing to continue to hammer Tyquan Thornton until he inevitably rises.
I'm fine
here.
with Thornton. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I would also like to grab Dulcich. I mean,
let's do it.
Keeps us. We're done at tight end now, and that's kind of nice.
We're done at tight end. No correlations there, but Dulcich and ADP faller here. 143. We're getting him at pick 156. And then, yeah, I'm making sure Tyquan's definitely my favorite of the wide receivers available here.
It's an interesting move you did there where you took Dulcich first because you can either, right, you don't want to have the reach on Thornton, but do you want the screenshot equity of the really nice value on Dulcich? What do you do?
Do you know what I do, Pat? This is all about integrity of the ADP because I want to continue to pack my Tyquan Thornton bags. And if I take him at pick 156 instead of 157, that's me slightly contributing to more steam. I got to keep him as low as possible.
Okay. All right. I like it.
Also, the chat.
Pierce thing. Okay.
Sorry, I was wrong. The chat pointed out that John was referring to Alec Pierce, not Dameon Pierce. I just saw the Pierce and assumed that was where the difference was.
Well, I know they like Dameon. I know Silva loves Dameon Pierce, so that one seemed plausible. Wait, so I'm lower or higher on Alec Pierce? Higher?
I'm guessing you're higher. John, can you confirm in the chat? I'm assuming you're much higher. Yeah, because I've been drafting primarily off your ranks, and I've ended up with a lot of Alec Pierce. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my guess is that if you're doing the projections and everything, maybe Alec Pierce looks like a shaky bet because there's just not that much passing volume in the offense. But I thought that Alec Pierce had a pretty promising rookie year. At one point, he was getting you like some of the underlying metrics were making him look like he was kind of coming for Pittman a little bit. He had pretty nice rate of first read targets last year. Pittman had a first read target on 17% of his routes, and Pierce wasn't far behind at 14%. He's more of a deep threat than Pittman, which I think should mesh well with what Anthony Richardson's doing, what his strengths are. So, I'm actually okay taking Pittman because he gets in this range where it's like, well, what else am I supposed to do? But it's kind of a bet that like second year, highly drafted wide receiver who flashed a little bit. He wasn't like super efficient, but he's a deep threat who I think meshes well with the quarterback. We could be a little bit wrong about the idea that Pittman is going to be this big target hog and everyone else is fighting for scraps. So,
yeah.
And the other thing about Pierce is you do have the out of like, nope, everything I said is wrong, but he catches an 80-yard bomb and you get there anyway.
Well, and one of the things you wrote about, and I think again, this is one of the push pulls with the conversation about overstacking, where it's like, if you take Pittman, Anthony Richardson, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, and Jelani Woods or something, and maybe that's excessive, but say maybe 4 instead of 5 of those guys. And people are like, how are all those guys getting there for you in week 17? It's like, well, they probably aren't, but you're making a massive bet that this offense, that Anthony Richardson is quote unquote him, and they go nuclear, and it's 1 week's a Michael Pittman game. 1 week's a Josh Downs game, 1 week's an Alec Pierce game. And because you made that bet, similar to like the Jags thing, we had the Zay Jones game, you had the Christian Kirk game, you had the Evan Ingram game. And then next thing you know, you're dragging a team to the finals, and then you can still live with just a couple of those Colts guys not going off once you get there.
Yeah. I think that, I wrote about this in the piece today where if you're betting on Anthony Richardson, he's normally your quarterback 1.
Yeah.
And so you really want him to go off in week 17, which means he's probably throwing for a couple touchdowns and, maybe he rushes for a couple too. But you want those touchdowns to hit your lineup twice.
Yep. We're about to pick here at the 15-16 turn. We have a 2-3-7-2 build so far. Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Bijan, Etienne, Pacheco. Our wide receivers, Davante Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett, Treylon Burks, Jonathan Mingo, Alec Pierce, Tyquan Thornton, and our tight ends, Pat Freiermuth and Greg Luscious Lock Dulcich. I don't mind building out our Raider bet with Renfro here to be our 8th wide receiver and also some decent running back options.
That works for me. I also kind of like Deontay Foreman as the Bears and the Falcons have the most fun that either coaching staff has had all season.
Yeah.
And they just run it down each other's throats.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this a lot with both Deontay Foreman and Jeff Wilson, and I guess Kendre Miller too, the cheapest of these really ambiguous backfields. I've really been liking those. The only thing here, 18 seconds, is there any running back we would want to grab? This is probably a 5 running back build, or do we just want to lock up Renfro since we already have a Raiders bet?
I'm okay with Renfro.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly some running backs here that I kind of like, but I don't know. We're so strong at running back.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people might look at this room and be like, Bijan, Etienne, Pacheco, Foreman. You're like, yeah, it's fine. And we're like, God, this is the best running back room I've ever seen since Pat started with Austin Eckler and Saquon Barkley.
I mean, what I like about this running back room is that like you can say what you want about Pacheco, and I'm not like the world's biggest Pacheco guy, but he was catching passes in the playoffs. He's a second-year back. He's super fast. He plays with Patrick Mahomes. Like he could be an absolute league winner. Like he does have a ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
That, by the way, like the receiving back that's like definitely going to block him. Well, did you forget about McKinnon? McKinnon's like super old and he was literally rested for dead legs like 3 years ago. So like, and he was phased out in the playoffs. Like there's pretty clear paths to Pacheco being a home run. And then, and then CEH is like his other competition. So come on. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could happen in a way where like you get Bijan as a hit, you get Etienne as a hit, and it's pretty easy to see how those happen. And then you get Pacheco as a hit, and it's like, we're good. We don't really need much else. We need like a guy who's going to come in and occasionally pitch in, contribute, 18 points here and there. Deontay Foreman could totally be that guy. We're going to take one more stab at that guy later. But I already feel like really good with how this running back room looks good, assuming we hit. But guess what? We got to hit. That's like the way this shit works.
Yep. Let's talk about our in game a little bit here. I think we both agree with a 2-4-8-2 build. We will be taking a 5th running back. Then I do think you can pretty much make an argument for any of the other positions for our 18th round pick in this 2-4-8-2 build. The one thing I will say is we have skinny stacks with both our quarterback and a bring back. So we have Lawrence to ETN with the Mingo bring back, and we have Geno to Lockett with the Freiermuth bring back. Do you want to try to force a double stack with an off the board player with one of these guys, or are you seeing another position? Is this where we say, hey, let's take the bankable points at tight end? You could potentially accomplish both with Noah Fant. Curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm open to the tight end, especially if like wide receiver just looks really barren at this point. Tight end is also, I think, like totally viable with what we did. I said we were done at tight end earlier, but if you have Freiermuth and Dulcich, you can take a third tight end. It's not like I mean, I've taken a third tight end. I wrote about this in the piece today too. It's like, I think it's fine to take you probably want to go 2 super cheap guys, but like you could go Mark Andrews and then tack on like Tyler Conklin and Kate Otten or whatever. Like who cares? It's like, it's it's like you only are supposed to spend $1 on your tight end 2, not 2. It's like, I think I'll be all right.
Yep.
Especially there's not that many backfields that we're all that confident about who to take in. So the opportunity cost is pretty low. And we'll see who's there, but this could be an interesting spot anyway.
Yeah, it could. Also, these drafters.
These guys need a tight end, so probably not.
Need tight end. Oh, Puka. Suck it, Davis. So the 2 guys is...
Mayer's a smash here.
You think even over getting a double stack with...
We did we already did a Raiders thing, so we got a Raiders thing built in. We
have 3 Raiders, though, and only 2 Seahawks with our quarterback.
Well, Hunter Renfrow gets traded, and then Mayer moves up.
So even going, you prefer Michael Mayer over Noah Fant stacked?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayer's getting disrespected.
This is a nice ADP for sure. I mean, 198 now, getting him at 204.
I got him at the 18-12 the other day. I mean, it's silly.
So Pat, the guy I've been starting to take, I've gotten red pilled by Evan Silva and this Ty Chandler stuff. Like he's been my guy I've tacked on as my 5th running back in a lot of these builds lately.
Okay. I'm good with it.
My thought is this. It's the same thing about, we just said, like Madison is for sure rising, right? Like he's going to rise another couple of rounds. Both McBride and China, even if you set aside like guessing which one is going to be the second back, I mean, they're going to rise. And if we get clarity on who's the second back, like they're going to be going in the 12th, 13th round. And don't you think of those profiles, as much as we like Dwayne McBride's profile as a rusher, if anyone in that backfield is going to catch some passes, it's Ty Chandler, right?
Yeah, I think so. And McBride has been banged up in OTAs, which is not what you want to see for a day 3 rookie with like serious red flags in his profile. I mean, McBride's like, he has the lowest yards per out run over his career in college of like any running back in my database. I mean, the guy's got no real shot of being a pass catcher. So outside of Madison, who can catch passes and will be out there to catch passes a fair amount. But like if Madison were to miss a game, I mean, there's no way that Chandler wouldn't be the guy unless they sign somebody.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, and he's going to be on the team, right? Like the floor isn't super low.
Right. We got Nez dropping some quotes here. Vikings offensive coordinator Wes Phillips on whether second-year RB Ty Chandler is ready for an increased role. I think he's going to have to be. Ooh, I love the ominous nature of that quote right there.
Okay.
But I do, I mean, my whole thing, right, is we're looking at these running backs. You have what? I mean, this does show the state of the board. You have the UFAs who, when they sign, they will move up. We have some rookies that we like, but could potentially be the running back 3s on their team and not the running back 2s, an Izzy or an Evan Hull or a Dwayne McBride. Then you have like the super ambiguous running back situations with like the Cowboys. No one knows what to do with Deuce Vaughn, Travion Williams versus Chase Brown, Keontae Ingram versus who's the other back over there. So this is like that spot where we get to where you are liable to waste a dead roster spot. I just think Ty Chandler, at least ADP wise, has a really good chance of jumping out of this range soon.
I think so. Although he's someone that I think we could maybe get ahead of ourselves on because like they could sign Fournette or Hunt or, I guess those are really the only 2 left now, but Zeke, I mean, they could sign Zeke too. So I don't know. I think it's a little fragile. We don't really, it's not like a talent-based play, and we don't have you could also see, I think he has to. You could read that as like him calling up the GM after going, Quessy, please sign someone,
Yeah. I was joking. Someone in the Fantasy Life Discord yesterday asked me where I thought all of these guys were going to go, and I did say it would be hilarious if all of these teams just played musical chairs with the dusty vets, and it's like Zeke goes to the Cowboys, and
funny.
like Lenny goes to the Vikings, and then Dalvin goes to the Bucks or whatever, and they just all switch places.
Kyren Williams was floated here. That's the guy I picked on ADP chasing as my closing line value guy.
Yeah.
Splitting carries with Cam Akers right now.
In the thing, I will say the reason I like say if we work under the assumption that it's an equal chance that Ty Chandler is the running back 2 versus Dwayne McBride, and it's an equal chance that Kyren Williams is the RB2 over Zach Evans. And I know people might quibble with that, but just for this thought exercise, if we get clarity, say you get dueling Roto World blurbs, obviously Dalvin Cook is gone in this scenario, and it's like Ty Chandler is the RB2 for the Vikings. Kyren Williams is the RB2 for the Rams. Aren't drafters much, much more excited about Ty Chandler as the defined backup in the Vikings? So what you win when you hit on the Kyren Williams thing, I think is far less than what you get with the Ty Chandler situation.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think maybe you have a little bit more risk of them signing someone.
Mm-hmm.
There's one. I just think maybe the Kyren one, he seems to be, maybe carving out a role in the offense. But I do agree. If both the upside probably in real life and from a closing line value perspective, it's higher with Chandler.
Let's circle back and review this team now that it is in the books. A 2-5-8-3 team for us here, of course, battling the Piss Boys this morning. Didn't get as many of, say, the big stacks that I think we would maybe otherwise get in normal rooms, but we got Trevor Lawrence and Geno Smith at quarterback, our running backs, Bijan Robinson, Travis Etienne, the controversial dead zoney yet not dead zoney Isaiah Pacheco, Deontay Foreman, and Ty Chandler at running back. Our wide receivers, Davante Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett. It got so dusty and old there that we did recover quickly with second-year Treylon Burks, rookie Jonathan Mingo, second-year Alec Pierce, second-year Tyquan Thornton, and then Pat's little $1 million talisman, Hunter Renfrow. And at tight end, Pat Freiermuth, Greg Dulcich, Michael Mayer. What's your overall thoughts on how this team came out?
I like it. We had a comment on the Mayer pick of taking Jimmy G's rookie tight end. Seems like a real strong upside play.
Yeah.
But I think it is a strong upside play to take a good tight end prospect who is going to, I think, get on the field right away because he actually is a pretty good blocker. He's not a pure receiver like a Sam Laporta, who is pretty interesting, but maybe that takes him a little longer to actually earn the coach's trust. I think Mayer's going to be out there, but then, it's not that fun. You're not scoring many points, kind of boring. So what? We got Freiermuth and Dulcich. Mayer comes on at the end of the year. Like we saw last year from a number of rookie tight ends. We get that Trey McBride week 17 explosion, and it wins us the money.
Yeah, I like this team. It was another one of those spots where it's like I talked about this with Shawn last week too. Ideally you would have 5 wide receivers through 7 rounds, but these rooms really don't make it possible. But I legit, as much as I joke around about everyone taking my wide receivers and hating these rooms, it does push me into much different pockets than I normally will get. And I like kind of dancing around, getting an ETN and a Pacheco. Those are ranges of the draft. I'm normally taking wide receivers. And instead that pushed to different spots. I actually haven't been getting a lot of Jonathan Mingo because then that's been a prime, hey, I'm selecting Kendre Miller. I'm selecting, whoever in that range. So then being able to think through those 2v2s and getting exposure to some of those players that you still like in correlated fashion, I think we recovered decently.
Yeah, we have nice little, I like the Raiders thing. I like doing stuff like that. I like being like, I have 3 Raiders and, maybe the Raiders maybe everyone's freaking out about the Raiders and like Jimmy G. I mean, Jimmy G's been like a highly efficient quarterback throughout his career. He's a distributor, no one wants to play Jimmy G in fantasy, but we don't have Jimmy G, which I love. I love that we have a bunch of weapons on an offense that, maybe could pass a lot. because they're going to suck, but they do so in a semi-efficient manner. And like his foot's fine, and everyone would like. That's one of those things we could easily look back on and be like, oh, remember when we freaked out that Jimmy G's foot was going to be a thing, and then that just wasn't. Like it is June.
Yeah, exactly. This team I think came out well. It is a bummer to not like. It feels weird to say it's a bummer to lose out on Zay Jones, but Trevor Lawrence is one of those guys where
It kind of is though.
It is, because if the Trevor Lawrence pays off, and we did mitigate some of the risk at this ADP, right? At pick 84, some of it's coming, but man, we still need this to be a relatively undervalued offense. We need ETN to hold off committee stuff. If we're making that bet on the Jags, you would like to have one more player in. And we had a couple cracks. I thought maybe Evan Ingram would fall back to us when we got Pat Freiermuth. It just didn't work out. And this is one of those spots where you just can't force it, right? We're not taking Jamal Agnew just to get our double stack with Lawrence.
No, I don't think so. And even like Zay and Ingram, like I think Zay and Ingram are not great picks. So am I going to reach like, pretty far ahead at ADP to get guys I don't like? No. That's like not how I like to do the correlation thing. That's not really the point of it. But I think this lineup, although it's not as correlated as I would like, Geno goes off for like Lockett has a huge game, pulls along Geno, and we got Freiermuth coming back. So we got a little explosion. We got the 3 Raiders, Jimmy G wins it for us.
There you go.
It's certainly possible. We got the running backs just 40 carries for both Bears and Falcons running backs.
There you go.
3 touchdowns between the two of them.
Before I forget, and then we are going to look at our guy, John. John, went into the eye of the wide receiver cyclone there and started with Saquon and Eckler trying to recapture some BBM3 magic. We'll look at that in a sec, but a few plugs, and we're also going to look at Pat's legendary upside article, and then Shawn Siegele will be here in a few minutes to draft another Best Ball Mania 14. But a few things. I'm going to do my first Underdog Cardio Club draft today on the Swolecast at 1:30. David Kitchen hosting. Davis doing Lord knows what. I don't know, making like showdown lineups for some random sport while drafting. And me running on a treadmill selecting. Sounds like a classic Swolecast episode. And then Pat, Ben
Amazing.
Gretch, and I will be back at 9:15 p.m. Eastern tonight. And as you guys have probably heard from last week and then on ADP chasing, Ben Gretch has gotten the underdog drafting bug. He drove across state lines, has caught the bug. And Pat, I think we're going to give him as many puppies as he can handle tonight. I'm thinking we multi-table some puppy drafts.
Yeah, how are we doing this? Are we going to do like a bunch of different tabs? That would be kind of, we share the screen instead of the tabs, and then we can see, because it says, shout out to Underdog, they got it'll tell you in the Chrome tab how many picks away you are.
I think that's what we do.
That sounds really fun.
Normally I'm kind of anti multi-tabling for content purposes, but to me, this is like, when the kid gets caught smoking a cigarette and then the dad makes him
you make him smoke the whole
pack. We're gonna make Ben Gretch smoke an entire pack of puppies tonight. Is what we're gonna do.
Well, there's your thumbnail. I don't know if we have the thumbnail done yet, but there it is.
Yeah, I'm getting that to our guy here shortly. And then, also, Spags and I are going to be going on the 4for4 Best Ball Happy Hour as well. I think I am going to do Underdog Cardio Club draft for that one as well. So that will be at 3 p.m. Eastern. So lots more drafts today if you want to watch.
Well, potentially a ton of drafts, because I have never been a smoker, Pete, but there are apparently 20 cigarettes in a pack. So I don't know if we're going to be able to do 20 drafts at once, but
20, that analogy does fall through there. It'll be just a few black and milds for Ben Gretch.
Okay. Yeah, how many black and milds are in a pack? Let me look that up.
Let's look at John's team, and then I do want to touch about your article that is up as well. So let's see how John recovered here with this start. Where is John? Roto run. All right, so he did start Austin Eckler, Barkley, then waited for Tank, Chuba, and Fournette late. His quarterbacks, Justin Herbert and Daniel Jones. Nice little value there on Daniel Jones. Wide receivers, okay, Calvin Ridley, Mike Williams, Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, Rondell Moore, DJ Chark, Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Richie James, getting that backdoor Danny dime stack. Tight end, Dallas Goedert and Evan Ingram. So you're the one who sniped Evan Ingram from us. How do you think John recovered in this piss boy room?
I think he did pretty good. I mean, I like, the Rondale Moore pick is a pretty good one. Like, I don't think you're getting like this massive season from Rondale Moore, but certainly as a wide receiver 5, when you like need a solid wide receiver, I think he's like he's going to run a lot of routes this year. I think he's
Yeah.
like very solid. ETR still has him ranked like even ahead of where John reached for him. So I think that was a sharp pick. Isaiah Hodgins, another guy that I like. Like I think Sam Sherman was pointing out to me in Discord that, you know, the floor is still very low on Hodgins. Like if he doesn't win the starting outside wide receiver job, he's like he could get cut because like there's not really like kind of anything else for him to do. Like he doesn't really play special teams. There's some guys they may find more interesting as kind of upside depth pieces. So the floor is really, really low. But like if Hodgins, especially correlated, is like going to be playing this year, he's probably a starting wide receiver. You know, it's kind of all or nothing with him. So I think that's like a good way to try to dig out, right? It's like I don't want to have to make this bet, but I'm making the bet. I need a wide receiver who's starting. It's not like you're getting, you know, a couple games here and there. I think if Hodgins hits, he's like a starting wide receiver for the Giants.
Yeah, I'm definitely impressed with how this team turned out, because if you told me you started with 2 running backs and also got an elite quarterback and then 2 good tight ends, I would say you're absolutely buried at wide receiver. But Ridley, Mike Williams, Evans, Sutton, you know, you're still 4 before round 10. And then, yeah, you just basically need to hit on one of these breakouts and getting that kind of stack there. So for as many detours as you made in the top 100, I think it came together nicely. And the key to this, right, Pat? And you talked about this. This is how your Ramondre pick was last year, your 3rd running back. I mean, to make this work, John had to wait all the way to pick 150 to make his 3rd running back selection.
Yeah, I think the running back room was really smart. Getting Fournette there, like Fournette, right? You get Bigsby, Hubbard, and then you kind of like flipped it, right? Like normally you'd get like some boring veteran production to kind of help you chug along earlier, you know, like that's, you know, kind of like a Damian Harris type of pick, right? But you're like just betting that Fournette is that guy for you. And then you've got the 2 high upside handcuffs ahead of that, which I like. So yeah, I think great running back room.
Pat, I mentioned that you had an opus out that I was actually just reading this morning when it hit my inbox. This is for all legendary upside subscribers. Draft like you have a time machine. Give people the kind of the elevator pitch on this piece, because there's lots of interesting thoughts in here.
Yeah, basically this is like my philosophy on the late rounds. It took me a little bit to kind of get this all together. The tight end piece that I wrote about that came out of this. I have a quarterback article that I'm gonna write that is gonna kind of come out of this. This piece is like 8,000 words, so it was like a whole, you know. I had a lot of thoughts. The first like half of it is totally free. So if you just want to check out, even if if you just want to subscribe for free, there's a lot of information in there as well. But essentially, I'm talking about the idea that if you're drafting a team, you know, it's not that you need to be right. Obviously, you need to be right on some of your picks, but you need to be like really right. And you need to be right in a way where these guys are blowing up in week 17. And your early picks are going to be the ones who have by far the best chance of delivering those massive performances that are actually going to vault you to the top of a 441 person leaderboard. So with that definitely happening for you, because otherwise, why are you even finishing the draft? It can actually kind of just subtly help kind of shift your thinking of how to attack the late rounds. Like if you know for a fact some of those early guys are going to do that for you, it can actually help you make your late round picks, I think. And there's a number of ways that you can think through that. And that's why the article is so long.
Yeah, and there's lots of good stuff there too. And it does, I think one of the things that's really helpful too, and you kind of point out and you show some box scores and overall season performance from players who will not go down in history as league winners. No one's going to think about that Justin Jackson, or you referenced that Byron Pringle week, or even the Zay Jones one last year. Like those are going to be lost to the sands of time, but just getting that one massive spike week can just completely flip advance rates on their head in the playoff too. And then viewing your selections through that lens. Although I think a lot of people get caught up with that of like, why would I take this backup running back? Like, I might get 1 or 2 good weeks. And you're like, yes, exactly. That is exactly what you want, is 1 or 2 well-timed good weeks.
Exactly. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown in 2021 had an insane final advance rate to the finals. He then went off in the finals. You had to have Amon-Ra St. Brown to take down the money, but he did not have the best finals advance rate among late round picks in 2021. Justin Jackson did. And Justin Jackson did nothing the entire season except he scored 30 points in week 16 when Austin Eckler missed that game. And the big thing with Justin Jackson, I get into the piece, I cover this in the piece as well. Justin Jackson was not drafted very often.
Yeah.
And we got late information that he, in fact, was the number 2 after he was a cut candidate around this time of the summer. And that's something I plan to really take advantage of, that late information, and kind of change my thinking on, sometimes we scroll down and we reach for dudes that aren't being drafted a lot. But in late summer, you don't have to scroll down because they weren't being drafted early in early drafts. So I'm not getting leverage on the other people drafting with me now, but I can get leverage on people who drafted a bunch of teams early, because I'm getting a guy that I feel confident will have a role, but he's also going to end up being drafted like 20% of the time in the whole tournament.
Yep. And I do think the tightrope walk of kind of what you're talking about too is this, and you of course acknowledge it in the piece, is this element of avoiding the dead roster spots too. And so you're trying to balance, like, I'm spike week hunting. I'm trying to find these guys who can do it, but I need to do it in a really smart way, because if I'm wrong about their position on the depth chart, I could just have a 0 on an otherwise really good team.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another huge component as well, which Leone pointed out in his Best Ball Manifesto.
All right, guys, we are about to fire up another draft here on the channel with Rotoviz's Shawn Siegele. Appreciate Pat swinging by. You can check us out tonight on Ship Chasing, drafting some puppy teams. Also, be sure to check out Legendary Upside. I have the links down below, both to Pat's YouTube channel, Legendary Upside, of course, to the newsletter and the site. Pat also has DraftKings rankings up now. If you guys are drafting over there, that is an awesome resource for you. Pat, any other promotions going on with Leg Up?
Still doing the $30 discount for your first year, legendaryupside.com/early. You can go ahead and get that and read the entire piece. I also have another piece coming out very soon on some of those tactics around the turn that we kind of touched on in this episode.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you, Pat. Make sure you guys are following Pat on Twitter, checking out Legendary Upside. Even if you aren't taking the plunge with the paid version, just get in there for some of those free articles, getting updates from him. I promise you will not regret it. Pat, we will see you later tonight on Ship Chasing. Peace out.
Later.
All right, we are back for another episode of the Best Ball Banana Stand. I'm your host, Peter Overzet, joined by Rotoviz's Shawn Siegele. Every single week here on my channel and on the Rotoviz airwaves, we draft a Best Ball Mania 4 team. We talk through our strategy. And Shawn, of late, we've been trying to figure out how to avoid or navigate these wide receiver avalanches. How are you doing today?
Good. I woke up this morning and it just felt like a $3 million day. So I can't wait to get into this avalanche draft.
So I'm sure you know from doing drafts with Colin, because I remember seeing this on some of your Rotoviz streams I would watch. And I don't know if you read the comments on our video. Knowing you, I'm guessing you didn't. But you gave a lot of people anxiety last week with us running the clock down on some of these picks. And so I just want to make sure you're aware of what you're doing to the audience with your indecision there.
Well, I've had some flashbacks to that Godwin Hawkinson selection. So no, it's fun every week. Colin and Ben give me a really hard time about filibustering the picks. Obviously, you don't have a great deal of time to make these selections when we're on the clock with underdog, which, I mean, Pete, that's what makes these drafts so fun.
It really does. And I'm sick. I kind of personally enjoy the drama of like, I don't even know what we're going to do 4 seconds before the clock ends. So I want everyone to know that that is not a bug around here. That's a feature to drafting with Shawn. You also mentioned, Ben, you guys dropped a Stealing Bananas episode yesterday. I ate that one up last night. Really fun conversation talking about these players we like, the DJ Moore, the Kyle Pitts, the Drake London, but really thinking through some of the more, systemic team level concerns with the passing volume and how to approach that in drafts and how we're not getting any discounts on those guys in underdog drafts. I thought that was a really great episode, Shawn.
Well, thank you. It was really interesting to talk with Ben about it. He had released a couple of fantastic articles over there on Stealing Signals that I really wanted to dive into and ask him about, and got to do that yesterday. So that was awesome. I gave him a hard time because the first one was an anti-DJ Moore piece, and everybody knows that Ben is the foremost DJ Moore advocate. The second article, he didn't really reference it or couch it that way, but I thought that it was actually coming back and saying, look, you can take this guy. So I wanted to make that push in the show. We had a lot of fun with it.
We did. And we are off to the races, Shawn. I did get us registered here for a Best Ball Mania 4 draft. If you are listening on the Rotoviz airwaves, we will make sure to keep you up to date on our selections as we go. I will always service the audio listeners. And of course, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, we got the draft board up here. I did forget my banner last draft, Shawn. This is, let's see, this is number 43. Best Ball Mania draft 43 for me. The ducks need to be fed. We need to get our background music, Shawn. I think I'm finally settled in, and we got the 1-6 today, Shawn. We'll be drafting from the 1-6.
Very nice. That relieves a little bit of that tension and pressure at the turn, where, especially in these avalanche drafts, you may have to go really early on some guys.
I've been thinking about that too, both for, when you and I are talking through selections and also just to make sure you aren't susceptible to a huge positional run. Like picking in the middle of the draft definitely gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can kind of, more preview what your opponents are going to do. You can look and say, all right, these teams 1 through 5, can we let this guy go and see if he'll come back around? I just think it's a much easier thought process from the middle of the draft.
And the second half of the first round, I would argue, is quite a bit weaker. And so from that perspective, also, I think you have to like where we are. I mean, this is a running back area for me, Pete. We get McCaffrey at that little bit of a discount.
Yeah, so Shawn referencing, we have 4 picks go right off the board. Jamar Chase, or Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, 5 picks, all wide receivers. I agree with you here, 1-6. I do have Shawn and Michael Dubner's blended ranks from Rotoviz uploaded in here. I know one of the other things people really appreciate too is just seeing your ranks, which are different than a lot of industry consensus. And I think it leads to, one, really fun drafting, but also kind of unique discussions of like, holy cow, we need to talk about why this player is so high. So in the first draft, we were drafting off of Pat's legendary upside ranks. Now we're drafting off of Shawn's Rotoviz ranks, influenced with Michael Dubner's as well. What are your thoughts, Shawn? How do we avoid a wide receiver avalanche? Again, this is going to be a friends and family draft. We do start with a running back. Do we have some tricks up our sleeve?
The more that I've been looking at this, and I know that it pushes against a lot of the things that we have emphasized through the years. Rotoviz has always been really heavy with elite tight end, 2 tight end, really heavy with window QB and 2 QB. But when you look at late in the draft, the best picks are almost exclusively QBs and tight ends. And I think you also get higher upside players at those positions this year than in some other years. So that moves me a little bit in that direction. And I mentioned the roster construction explorer that we have, the underdog, a couple tools there, also the advanced rate explorer, some really cool stuff. You look at that advanced rate explorer and you see that the tight ends and the elite tight ends have mostly been valuable for the playoffs. Now, the playoffs are hugely important, right? But if we do think that there are some late tight ends that have more upside than they usually do, we can look at. So I think that these next 6 picks need to be wide receivers unless the draft just really pushes us hardcore in a different direction, which it does have a tendency to do.
Yep. So we do see a bunch of wide receivers go. Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. If we do want a wide receiver, it looks like Chris Olave or T. Higgins would be our best bet. Olave right here at ADP. Or do you want to get real frisky with a Jonathan Taylor double running back start?
Which direction do you want to go? I mean, I say we got to take the 6 wide receivers, but man, it's so hard to pass on Jonathan Taylor.
I know. Yeah, I think we need to grab Chris Olave or risk getting really, really buried in this room. Where are you at? Because I want to talk about Jonathan Taylor because obviously people are starting to get a little spooked. I think people are worried about, is he going to catch passes? Is this offense with Anthony Richardson going to be as friendly for the running back position? And I think what else drafters are doing is they're saying, why should I take Jonathan Taylor here in the middle if I can just get Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry, around later? I think that's the calculus going there. Why is Jonathan Taylor still a slam dunk selection in the middle of round 2?
Well, round 3 is a really good running back round. There are some other names that we like a lot in there as well. So you can do that, especially if you're looking just for the one running back and you start wide receiver, which really is probably still preferable. It's just the first round wide receivers aren't that strong. Jonathan Taylor, I mean, we can get to a little bit more, after this next pick, but after the show yesterday, Ben and I were looking at D'Angelo Williams with Jonathan Stewart in the rookie season for Christian McCaffrey. Those guys combined for over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. D'Angelo Williams has some years in there. We were also looking at him kind of individually, where massive season with basically no receiving value at all. Underdog, obviously a format where, still the receiving value for running backs is very, very helpful. But if you had a guy who just went out and scored a ton of points like a Derrick Henry or potentially a Jonathan Taylor and did it through purely rushing, those points still count. So Jonathan Taylor is a bigger talent than those other guys. That would be, I think, the biggest argument for him.
For sure. We do see, wide receivers are flying off the shelves. Metcalf, Hopkins, Ridley, Josh Allen. We are on the clock. You can get Jalen Hurts at 3.6 if you'd like. We have a bunch of running backs we like. We could try to stay ahead of the Avalanche with a Keenan Allen or Deebo Samuel. Where's your lean?
I don't think there's any problem with taking Keenan Allen here. Usually I take one of those running backs, but since we started with McCaffrey, Allen is kind of the guy I like. This is the range he should be going in, and especially in Avalanche drafts, I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, we're going to select Keenan Allen here, 10 picks ahead of ADP, but I would say ADP is getting thrown out in this room with so many selections early. We see our guy Serum taking DeAndre Hopkins near the 1-2 turn, presumably to Galaxy Brain, the connection with Patrick Mahomes, if that happens. And nice. Do your research does get the very rare Jalen Hurts premium double stack, which is pretty hard to pull off in drafts. AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, all there off the rip, Shawn.
And it's interesting to see that development. Hurts is the guy I would least expect to fall kind of over time this summer. We're already seeing, you can pull up the Rotoviz ADP tools and track some of the guys. You can look at risers and fallers. Pete, one of the other things I was going to mention in terms of just needing to get these receivers early and trying to get that 6 in the first 7. We've talked about 5 and 7. That might not even be enough, right? I've mentioned to you before that I think only 4 receivers from wide receiver 60 on are even draftable at all. And 2 of those guys are among the 5 biggest risers in underdog ADP. So you're getting worse values on those 2 players as well now. And if you don't have the receivers, you're in big trouble. The other thing I thought was interesting in terms of this discussion of QBs and tight ends and where you let them fall to is that specifically for 2022, which we don't want to chase just the one season. I did a big 2-part article over the weekend and yesterday talking about the history really going back to 2015 for best ball in general. But when we look at 2022 and that wide receiver early, with the later picks at the onesie positions, that was very successful for playoff advance last year. We'd love to get a lot of teams through.
For sure. We see the duality of man from the 10 and the 11 hole, 4 straight wide receivers for the 11, 4 straight running backs for team 10. We are about to be on the clock here. Wide receivers continue to get wiped out. I will see best available here: Godwin, McLaurin, Drake London, DJ Moore. As far as the fallers, you do get Jahmyr Gibbs. I was really hoping we get McLaurin, a little correlation there with Christian McCaffrey. What do you like here, Shawn?
I'm okay reaching for Godwin. Taking Gibbs is really compelling, but I'm sort of interested to see how this wide receiver based and like a pure reach team works out here. And I think Godwin is really undervalued. I think the other receivers in this ADP range are just not particularly good picks. And so even though you're giving up the ADP value, you're kind of going out there and planting your flag and saying, I think the community is wrong. Chris Godwin is too good. A lot of the other receivers in this range, including some of the guys who have already gone, I think have massive red flags, and I would want to stay away from them even a round later than we are now.
Yeah. One other little bonus to the Godwin pick is correlated there with Chris Olave playing for a little NFC South shootout in week 17. And I know I saw some people in chat surprised passing on Jalen Hurts, but the thing, Shawn and I realized this last week, and when you take those early detours in a wide receiver heavy room, you can get punished and you can be left fighting for those 4 good wide receivers Shawn mentioned after wide receiver 60. So, and this is kind of the thing everyone's wrestling with this year. Is there a counter strategy to these super wide receiver avalanche rooms, or do you just have to embrace it and find your edges in other spots and stay ahead of the avalanche?
And that's what the article series I worked on this last week really was about. It was about elite QB with a hyper fragile running back approach. And it's a combination of a thought experiment with a lot of evidence from our tools. I think that can work. But you look at these drafts that you and I have been doing together, and people are going to look at it and say, well, I mean, it's only shifted a little bit, but even having those receivers shifted by 6 to 8 spots, it has a huge impact when you start to look a little bit later, in round 5, in round 6, in round 7, in terms of who you're getting if you haven't prepared for it and sort of struck early.
Yeah, and I read both of those last night. I was behind on 2 of the underdog workshops that you have up on Rotoviz. Really interesting pieces. And, one of them talking about how to pull off an elite quarterback with a hyper fragile strategy, which I wouldn't recommend doing that in one of these streamed rooms, but it can be viable if done in a more, quote unquote, normal room here. All right, we are on the board here. You got Evans, Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Burks available. You do have some fallers here at other positions. What stands out to you?
Well, Burks is a name that within the last week or so, I've really been thinking that we need to get some more exposure to. I really don't like the QB situation there. And the week 17 with Houston is also something that doesn't interest me very much, both because I wouldn't expect that game to shoot out, and I don't like any of the players to kind of come back and put with Burks. But if we do have a one-off in an extremely wide receiver heavy build here, he's the guy who I think that next year out of this group, we're potentially talking about much, much earlier. And I mean, we're going to do enough of these drafts. We don't have to stay away from certain guys, but Pickens is someone that we've drafted a lot of.
Yeah, for sure. Pat and I selected Treylon Burks in draft number 1 here today. And, I was saying that I think his ADP is going to settle in this range where we're taking him right now in this wide receiver heavy room. How much of it changes for you? Because the thought experiment I did with Pat is like, if you knew you were getting 17 games of Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, I mean, Treylon Burks is probably going in the 4th round in that case.
I think so. And I mean, he got a little bit of good buzz in the last week, but I also was looking back through some of our sports info solutions data in kind of making a separate argument for JSN and why even in a 3 wide receiver depth chart where all 3 guys could be elite, why he is viable that early. And just kind of going through some of the history of the players being drafted in that range, it just jumps out to you again what a massive prospect Treylon Burks really was. And that if he hadn't been hurt so much last season, I mean, you're probably not going to be talking about him up in that Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave range. I mean, they were just so good, but I mean, he'd be much more expensive.
Yep. This is one of the most quintessential wide receiver avalanche drafts, maybe even more so than our one last week. Although I guess some guys here slipping a little bit. I would have been interested to see if we would have pulled the trigger on Justin Herbert at pick 60 at 67 if he fell to stack up with Keenan, but he does go there. We are looking at the board here. I'm curious, do you think we have room for a tight end or quarterback detour here, or is this a spot where we keep grabbing these wide receivers as they fly off the shelves?
I'll be interested to see where a couple of those receivers who are still at the top of my rankings go. I mean, for me, the pick would have been Kenneth Walker.
Yep.
I mean, he's massively undervalued there. I would be okay with doing Pitts because Pitts is a way to play.
Who's your favorite wide receiver? Because we could play the tight end coming back but I'm going to put Pitts in the queue right now too.
Well, I think that Toney is the most likely guy to blow up from that team. And I mean, if he did, then you're talking about a huge win at these particular prices. One of the elements that I think does make it a little bit tougher is that I don't think that there are a lot of fun Bengals, especially at the receiving positions, after those two early guys. And then, I mean, obviously, Patrick Mahomes is long gone. So there are some structural elements that make Toney problematic. And then on top of that, you have the fact that he's going to miss 11 of the games and give his other receiving options a chance to jump out there and get over him. But when you look at the talent, you look at the QB situation, and one of these years, Travis Kelce is going to drop down a little bit. And it's so hard to do because anytime that you do it and you're not right, people will just be all over you about how you didn't play the most obvious thing. But it's so important to be early as opposed to late with your thesis on guys who are at the age cliff, not only avoiding them, but the players who could benefit as a result. If you're not early, you're just drafting everybody about where they're projected. And if those guys stay healthy, then maybe you still win some leagues. If you have a good structure, maybe you still win some leagues. But if you want to benefit from some league winning players, I mean, you got to go out there and be early on some of the guys.
Yeah, and Pitts does go. What I was trying to see if we could get through there is we had these tight ends sliding, George Kittle sliding all the way to 69. I was looking on this side of the board. I knew TJ Hawkinson had already been selected. Didn't necessarily know if Serum would double tap elite tight end. And then I knew we had some teams with elite quarterbacks here who might not want to. Oh, and Casey already had Mark Andrews. So I was wondering if we could grab Goddard at 78 for our elite tight end. Is that something we want to do? Or is JK Dobbins our Kenneth Walker from last round who's now slid 22 picks past ADP?
I think that Dobbins is such a massive smash here.
Let's do it. Talk about Dobbins. I was very underweight on him. I finally corrected that yesterday, getting my first share, now getting another share here. The counter is going to be, quintessential dead zone back, although falling 2 rounds past that right here. Give me the hype on JK Dobbins.
Well, if we're going to take guys who have a little bit of that dead zone profile, probably aren't going to catch enough passes to meet that kind of legendary upside type of criteria, then we want players with great speed. We want players who have the potential for efficiency that almost no one else can touch. And Dobbins has done that at the college level. He's done that with the Ravens. We believe in his individual talent. And then on top of that, you have the situation where teams have to account for Lamar Jackson. I mean, this could be the highest scoring Ravens team that we have witnessed in the Lamar Jackson era. It could be the most explosive team in terms of getting down by the end zone quickly. JK Dobbins is kind of one of these sneaky guys who, even with his size, even with Jackson also scoring touchdowns, to be, in that Aaron Jones type of conversation where you're not really thinking about him as a touchdown scorer. It's not that big back, and yet could lead the league in touchdowns. When you get him at this price, you go through and you check out the Advanced Stat Explorer and see what he did even last year when he was being caught from behind by linebackers. And yet his advanced metrics are extraordinary. He's just simply too talented to fall into this range, especially in an offense that should score a lot of points.
Yeah. And it is interesting too. We talk about, maybe it feels gross to take Keenan 10 picks ahead of ADP, Godwin, 13 picks ahead of ADP, Burks 15 picks ahead of ADP. But then you start to get this ADP back, with these running back fallers. And I think from an ADP value standpoint, it ends up being a wash here. All right, we are on the clock, Shawn. The wide receivers have gotten wiped out. We have another running back faller in Dalvin Cook. I think I made you pass on him last week. This could be a spot for him. Do you see anything at quarterback or other positions?
Not really, and I probably prefer the upside play of his brother.
James?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah. Okay. Talk about that, because obviously you have Dalvin Cook sliding, and I'm guessing your take is, well, he should be sliding, and he should maybe be sliding even further.
Well, I don't know how much of Dalvin being there. Let's see. I can see it. There's a little bit of the other portion of our rankings that's pulling Cook up. I had a long conversation with Connor about this. I mean, Dalvin Cook was still pretty good last year. And so if he's traded, I think it becomes interesting. If he's traded to a good team, it becomes interesting. If he's cut, which you also get the impression is fairly likely, I mean, he starts to fall into this Kareem Hunt, Ezekiel Elliott group. Now, he's not going to, it's not the same group, but there are similarities there where the potential for a fall deep into the draft and the potential for a landing spot with a team that has a young back that they actually want to emphasize. And so you get these two guys side by side on the field the first month of the season, and the young guy who the team maybe wasn't completely confident in blows up. I mean, Dalvin could go to extremely low volume in a heartbeat. And that's not the kind of pick I think we want to make here in the first 8 rounds.
Yep. Definitely makes sense to me. I want to mention again, too, make sure you guys are checking out the Underdog Workshop article Shawn has been doing up on Rotoviz. There's now 3 of them in the series. And I had so much fun last night, Shawn. I went down the rabbit hole of following all the links. So I reread Connor O'Driscoll's old piece about why the wide receivers are still so powerful on Underdog. I hopped over to Michael Dubner's initial piece about the quarterback prices this year. You can really go down a fun rabbit hole on Rotoviz with those articles. We're about to be on the clock here at pick 102. Our team so far, no quarterbacks, no tight ends, CMC, JK Dobbins, James Cook at running back. Our wide receivers, Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Treylon Burks, Kadarius Toney. What are you seeing here on the board, Shawn?
I like the contingency-based plays at running back in this range. So I think Rashad Penny is extremely interesting. I mean, Tua is a spectacular value, and yet, I mean, he doesn't necessarily fit with what we're doing in this particular draft. And if we continue to load up at running back and wide receiver, it gives us the opportunity to do that late QB, late tight end build that, number one, I think is good overall. And then number 2, I think becomes even much more powerful in this particular type of room.
Yeah, so what, like, circling, so I do select Rashad Penny for us here. I agree, there were no other obvious picks for us there at other positions. I know the big dynamic everyone's wrestling with this year is, okay, elite QBs and QB window QBs have traditionally been how we win leagues. This year, the landscape is so different that the elite QB prices and even the quarterbacks available in the QB window are much different. And now wondering, it seems like we're still applying previous year's elite QB prices when talking about the advantage they give you, and wondering, is that all priced out in round 2? Are these QB window guys who you wrote about, a large chunk of them busted last year? Is this dynamic pushing us to uber late quarterback when we don't get a value, when we don't get an obvious stack? It sounds like that's kind of where you're leaning right now, at least with this build.
It is. And you look at the guys in the window last year who blew up, and you're talking about 2nd and 3rd year quarterbacks, some of them with some hybrid rushing value, who had a breakout or a secondary breakout that was huge. You look at the QB window this year, and it's not really that type of profile, which immediately, I think, should give you some pause. You also think about, well, where are those guys positioned this year? Well, they're positioned at the end of drafts. So the community is saying they're riskier. You have to take that into consideration. There's a chance you would draft a guy who doesn't even end up being the quarterback. We know we want as many live players as possible. The other problem there is it does make it more difficult to set up all of the correlation elements when you don't know who you're going to get at the QB position until late. And if you actually push it to get the value, then even some guys you've drafted early at QB, you may miss on the QB that you need with them. So you could end up with a great structure and great player value, but maybe not the playoff upside that you need to maximize that. But I think that you have to take some risks if you want to build those super teams. I think that that element of it is really appealing overall, and then especially in these rooms.
For sure. And man, yeah, we see Tua go at 113. Nice little value there. We were debating Pat Freiermuth. He now slides 8 picks past ADP. That seems like a great selection for us unless something else is catching your eye.
Yeah. Antonio Gibson, I think, is interesting there. Freiermuth to me is more interesting when we already have one of the two Steelers wide receivers. And you and I think, have gone that route a couple of times pretty successfully, because Pickett ends up being, Pickett is the best pick in drafts. And so we end up with a lot of exposure there because he's the breakout guy, but also it's much easier to build that Steelers team than it is so many of the other things you're trying to do, where you can easily go for it and miss, or you have to reach and you're losing some of the player, some of the ADP value, and not even necessarily ADP value, but value to your own ranks, which is another thing that I would be heavily emphasizing there. Steelers, a great way to do that, but in part because it's such a great approach, I have really high exposure, and so I want to maximize it as much as I possibly can with multiple guys from that group. Is that a good enough argument for passing on him here?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say, and this was another kind of conversation to the late round quarterback, and we did select Antonio Gibson, by the way. So we're at a 0.55 build right now. No one can accuse us of not getting unique. The only thing I was thinking about is, because we want to set ourselves up for some backdoor stack options, Freiermuth, and then giving us an avenue to Kenny Pickett, a quarterback who's probably going to be on our radar regardless. To me, I like breaking ties in favor of some of those pass catchers who I know have a quarterback available late. But you could also argue in Antonio Gibson, we also open up a path to Sam Howell.
And that's a pretty good path. We have to hope that yesterday's controversial interview, what have you, with Ron Rivera keeps Sam Howell in round 17, round 18.
Yeah. So we're going to be on the clock here at pick 126. Definitely in some dicey territory here. Derek Carr gone. Can't get that stack with Olave. We do have some fallers with Aaron Rodgers. What do you see here on the board?
Do we have a reach option at wide receiver? One of the things I would be wondering about.
Hyatt, a DJ Chark.
Too early for Thornton?
No, it's never too early for Thornton. In this room, I took him on my draft with Pat. I take him in every other of my Best Ball Mania drafts, and we are, running out of those wide receivers. And I'm going to guess, Shawn, when you talk about the 4 wide receivers after wide receiver 60 that you think are viable selections, I'm guessing Tyquan Thornton is one of them.
He is one of them, and he is one of the biggest risers over the last couple of weeks in ADP. Yep. So I have some teams that are Mike Gesicki, Tyquan Thornton, Mac Jones in the last 3 rounds. That's going to be tough to pull off going forward.
Right. Yeah, he is obviously in this room, but in general, you're getting a couple of factors. One, you're getting actual reports out of New England that he just looks incredible at camp. We now saw that confirmed by multiple teams. Yeah, and even then, even if you want to make for a late, renaissance year from Juju, they're going to be playing essentially different positions, right? Like, we're excited about Tyquan Thornton's deep speed down the field. Or are you even excited about him even expanding that route tree to where he's used more as an alpha and less as a deep threat?
He's so thin to end up with massive volume. But in addition to the speed that he has, that's very clear, and the ability to get behind people. And I do think they're going to take a lot more of those shots in this year's offense than in last year's offense. But they have shown a willingness to scheme a lot of touches to him around the line of scrimmage. And so if you're getting, these easy catches, and then on top of that, you're getting the vertical ones. And some of those scheme touches have been down by the end zone. In that week 17 game where he does have a little bit of a spike, factors in to pass win. He almost caught a second touchdown in that game. He dropped it, stepped on the line. When you're talking about that already from Tyquan Thornton, when you would expect him to blow up, he's just going to keep rising.
So we are about to be on the clock here at 12-7. We have 5 running backs, 6 wide receivers, still no quarterbacks or tight ends. Would you consider a backdoor stack here with Aaron Rodgers. You do have a guy like Mecole Hardman, the tight end available, Corey Davis, so to speak, or do you want to keep hammering other positions?
I'd be okay continuing to go their positions. What's your favorite move here? I think we could take Curtis Samuel.
Okay. Talk to me. So yeah, I assume this is a correlation play with Christian McCaffrey, a guy I haven't ended up with a lot, but we are needing to set up a quarterback selection. We already have Antonio Gibson. And in this room, ADPs don't matter anymore at wide receiver. Talk to me about Curtis Samuel.
Well, Samuel is I think the biggest beneficiary of the new offense that they're going to run there with Bieniemy. And to the point where Jahan Dotson, a player I love, but somehow always get wiped out of in these drafts, could be hurt by it. I think that Terry McLaurin is actually significantly overvalued. And I mean, McLaurin, the interesting thing about him is that you can put him then with a quarterback who's very dynamic in more or less the last round. And so I'd still be drafting McLaurin, even though in a vacuum, I don't think he's a good pick at all. Samuel gives you the chance to get a cheaper version of it. We talked a little bit about that on the show last week. You brought up some of those hits, which I very much appreciate, where we're targeting the second or third guy. And I think when you're looking at the different teams, you're trying to find the talent, and where the talent is closer, where the talent is much farther apart. You know, with the Jets, as you mentioned a couple times, I really think that has got to be Garrett Wilson. But with the Commanders, I mean, it could be Curtis Samuel. And if it hits, I think it could hit big. Now, we picked him in round 12. This isn't the last round pick that you and Pat were talking about at the end of the previous show. And yet there are some elements to that where, I mean, if you got a couple of those spike weeks from Curtis Samuel, which I think are very much in play, I mean, he's a potential tournament winning kind of guy. I don't like a lot of the other receivers in this range as having that. And so if we can set up hopefully a Washington-based team here, I think that part of it would be interesting. And then especially, as you mentioned, with McCaffrey, where the Commanders 49ers game is one of those sort of stealth shootout possibilities that I really like, and you can play as opposed to some other games that are very expensive.
All right, Shawn, if we're going 3 quarterbacks, 3 tight ends, it is time to start selecting quarterbacks and tight ends. We do have a Jared Goff faller here. Anything else standing out to you?
Well, we got new buzz on Greg Dulcich. And if we're talking about guys who could win tournaments, talking about guys who could have that elite tight end game in week 16 or 17, I mean, if Russell Wilson moves back in the right direction a little, I think that this offense here, I love the running backs in it. Love Jerry Jeudy, love Marvin Mims. This is just another way to play it, and we are on that Keenan Allen selection early.
I was just going to ask how much of the Keenan Allen pick is pushing you in that direction. Obviously, we need tight ends, Dulcich and ADP value, but is that Keenan pick really what pushes you over the edge with that selection?
I think that it is in part because one of the other elements of a draft that's not going to follow ADP at all is you're dealing with a lot more wild cards. And so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to execute some of your correlation elements, especially when, 2 people are talking about it in a live draft there. So I think that anytime that you're given that, you definitely want to jump on it.
And does this feel like a 3 quarterback, 3 tight end room for you, or are there specific combinations that would say, hey, we could go 2 quarterback, 2 tight end if it breaks right?
I think if we really liked who we had, and then there's just so little control you can really exert over round 17 and round 18 if people mess with you, or just fits what they're trying to do. If you don't get those guys in the very last rounds you think you're going to get, there are some last round wide receiver and especially running backs, I think. And you and I talked about this a little bit after the last show. Would we be willing to attack the flex position through running backs instead of wide receivers late, even if that's not what all of your experience tells you, even if that's not what a lot of the analysis will suggest, even if that's not what the roster construction explorer tells you? If that's clearly the best guy, it's your best chance for points, and it's your best chance for a live player, we could go that route in the very final round, especially because if you're so wide receiver and running back heavy early, I mean, you have made the move to cover what you need to cover at those positions.
Right. we are about to select here at 14-7. So our team, we're at 0 quarterbacks. We got 5 running backs: CMC, JK Dobbins, James Cook, Rashad Penny, Antonio Gibson. Our wide receivers: Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Treylon Burks, Kadarius Toney, Tyquan Thornton, and Curtis Samuel. And we did just select our first tight end in round 13 in Greg Dulcich. We are about to be on the clock here at pick 163. We'll see what Do Your Research does here, and then we will make another selection. I completely didn't know that Derek Carr was still on the board. I didn't even scroll down. He would have been nice with Olave. Russell Wilson with Dulcich, well past ADP. What do you see?
Yeah, I think we've made a tiny little bet here on Wilson taking that step back. I mean, he's scored so many points at different times in the past. He's surrounded by elite talent, which is something that when you're looking for a guy to move back in the right direction is so important. I think that even if they're not healthier, which they haven't been, they have so much redundancy at the various positions right now that an elite coaching staff, which I think they're at the very opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of coaching this year, and that will help. The problems with Russell Wilson were already showing up in Seattle. And so it's not that we expect him to suddenly be peak Seattle Wilson, but at these prices with a team where we like that game, I mean, he's not even my favorite target when we're talking about building this kind of late tight end and QB team. But if he falls here to us, it's an interesting way to play it.
Yep. I wanted to pull up one quick question, not particularly relevant to what we just did, but JGFC saying, does your strategy change as far as in terms of drafting early versus drafting late? Maybe I'll pose it this way. If you didn't do content, if you were just behind the shadows or in the shadows fantasy drafter, when would you do most of your drafting?
I mean, I don't want to give kind of the boilerplate answer, but really early right now, I mean, you just have so many opportunities to exploit things like the, Gesicki, Thornton, Mac Jones thing at the very end of drafts. So you would do a ton early. I think then if you feel like the rooms are maybe softer in the middle, you're going to definitely make some moves then. If you have ADP kind of firming up and not changing a lot pre-training camp, and there are some huge values that you want to exploit, you get in there and you really load up on those players at that particular time. But then when we think about making sure we maximize for tournaments and we have as many live players as possible, even though you have that frustrating element of losing the values on a lot of your favorite guys as the community gets onto them, you do also get so much more information late that your 17 and 18 picks can be really profitable at that point.
Is this a spot to take Irv Smith with our little Kadarius Toney mini? Anything else jumping out to you?
Well, I really like Gesicki and McBride as massive playoff options, but I'm fine with Smith if you prefer going that route, because the Bengals could score.
Yeah, I'm just thinking here too with getting that huge value there. I guess it does. Kyler had gone. I would have been curious maybe if we wanted to try to do a McBride Kyler, if that moves stuff. I did just select Irv Smith first. The only other thought was I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to get both of those guys later. We would then have our choice. But I guess too, it doesn't help us with giving us another out to a quarterback stack. But we do still have some options here based on our board.
Yeah, there are two quarterbacks that I really like with the players that we have if we go the 3 quarterback route. Mm-hmm. And there is a third quarterback who would be more or less empty, but has the hybrid value and is undervalued by like 7 rounds.
Oh,
so if you got him, if you got him in the 18.
Okay. I honestly don't, I guess I could make one guess on who, but I don't even know if it's the correct guess. So stay tuned, regardless of whether we draft that player or not. We will reveal that here at the end of the draft. Let's see. There was another thing I wanted to ask you about here as we head into the 16th round. Our team here, 1-5-7-2. Russell Wilson still our only quarterback. We did tack on Irv Smith there at pick 174. Anything else jumping out to you in this room or things we should be considering other than, covering us at those onesie positions?
I think that the running backs coming off the board in this range are pretty interesting. Mostert has a ton of upside. I think that A-Chain is probably less at risk with all the Dalvin Cook rumors than Mostert and Wilson, though. So I probably am waiting on those guys until you get to see the spot. Deontay Foreman, such a huge talent, but in that 3 running back committee where, all 3 of them are going to be neutralized by Justin Fields. When we took Herbert last week, I love the individual talents. I think you should be sprinkling them in. Chase Brown, a hugely undervalued draft prospect, but when you think about what the perspective is on him just sort of globally, I love that price. I love the pick. Obviously, we love Chuba there. Ford is someone who I think, even at the slightly higher prices, is a fantastic selection. The running back picks in this range are fairly dynamic, and that's another reason why, even though one of the parts when I talk about hyper fragile in those underdog workshops, so the Win the Flex tool will tell you that the value is a running back. A lot of other people are out there doing great analysis telling you the value is a running back. But there are such massive structural reasons that you can't really go that route. And there's a lot of nuance to it. Cover a little bit of that in the article. But those types of running backs in these rounds, you just can't take those running backs early.
Yep. Mike Gesicki, the pick here. Talk to me about Mike Gesicki. I have seen a lot of people are on board with some of these Patriot value players, but it does seem like the community much prefers Hunter Henry to Gesicki, and we've actually started to see a bit of a flippening with the ADP for those guys. Give me the selling on Mike Gesicki here.
Well, Mike Gesicki is basically a receiver, and so you have the potential that if they don't like him as a receiver, that you start to lose snaps and routes because of what you just mentioned, where he's not really the tight end. Hunter Henry is the tight end. And yet, if you are trying to bring back some of the elements that they did with Gronkowski and Hernandez, and he's a little bit more the Hernandez type of piece, you have some tight end opportunity, but you also then have the chance that he could just win more or less the wide receiver 2 role, which when you have that in an offense that I do expect to take a step, when it's basically Tyquan, and then we selected Davante Parker last week. I think that, if you're talking about 17, 18, that's justifiable. But Juju and Davante Parker, they're not going to move the needle. Mike Gesicki and Tyquan Thornton could. I think Gesicki actually has multiple ways that he can potentially win in this offense because he's a receiver as opposed to a tight end.
I like it. Yeah. And you can definitely tell yourself a story of him still having those 2 touchdown games in him. Even when he was not running a ton of routes, not getting a ton of targets, they were still those games available to him. 2 more selections. I'm guessing these are going to be quarterbacks for us. What do you want to do here?
Well, I think it's a matter of order. So
yes.
We've got the 2 guys set up. Which order do you prefer?
Let's grab Sam Howell here. I assume that's one of the guys there. Yep, we have Antonio Gibson, we have Curtis Samuel, and of course we have our Christian McCaffrey bet. Real quick, was Sam Howell the guy you were referring to as undervalued by 7 rounds, or have we not talked about that guy yet?
We haven't talked about him, and he actually did go in this one.
Was it Ridder?
It is.
That was going to be my guess. Okay, now I want to hear you talk about Desmond Ridder.
Well, it just as a little bit of tease too for the Stealing Bananas. Ben and I talked about him at some length in the show yesterday. It's important to kind of keep in context what I'm really saying here. I'm not saying that he's going to be Anthony Richardson, but he has a season with the same number of rushing yards. He has a season with more rushing touchdowns. He's not Richardson level athlete, but he is very athletic in his own right. He's got an offense where they're going to have some schemed runs for him. And if you look at the other players on his team, Desmond Ridder is a vaguely hybrid QB with elite talent surrounding him. So he's a little bit of that high floor, high ceiling type of prospect where in all likelihood, you are seeing him either break out or be completely replaced in 2024. But at these prices, I mean, there are so many things that are built in that work in his favor. I would be surprised if the Atlanta offense is actually not very good this season. You're seeing that from the prices of the players around him, and yet he's got the characteristics that you want from a fantasy QB, and people aren't buying.
Yep. Yeah, and I assume you're open to Ridder in various configurations if you have a London or a Pitts, obviously, but also maybe unstacked if you are just looking for a little bit of juice in a QB3 kind of room.
Exactly.
All right, we are about to make our last selection. I don't think I have done one of these punt QB, punt tight end rooms, and I'm really glad that we got forced to this because one, it's fun to mix it up, and two, it did really allow us to get ahead of the avalanche and build out a really good running back room. CMC, JK Dobbins, James Cook, Rashad Penny, Antonio Gibson. I mean, tough to do much better than that and not get buried at wide receiver. And then we will be making our final selection here. I think you could, yeah, I mean, this is Mac Jones for us, right? No doubt about it.
It is. And the thing about taking Howell in the previous round, and you don't, again, know exactly how they're going to go. Purdy actually has the earlier ADP. But, I mean, if Mac Jones had been taken, then you can play. We talked about not having both guys from the week 17 game. And yet, if you're talking about 17 and 18, it's a little bit different there. And if you're talking about a 3 QB build, I think it's different than in a 2 QB build, which we were talking about when we put Pickett and Smith together in a previous draft. So it's not that you can't get hit on them. You will sometimes see all those QBs taken before our draft pick right here. You could do something like take a CJ Stroud, who also, I mean, CJ Stroud, I think, gets lost in all of the conversation about Richardson and Young. There are some meaningful reasons to think that he is the best of the 3 guys. I don't like to take him because he probably isn't going to run a lot, and I absolutely hate his weapons. But if you felt like you had to take a 3rd QB, you've got that where you could just go with him by himself. I think we would probably take an interesting final round running back if Mac Jones and Purdy had both been selected.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to bring up the Purdy thing too, so I'm glad that you mentioned this. Michael asking, first 3 QB, 3 tight end build. In Best Ball Mania 4, definitely. I was doing a bunch more of those in the big board. You had the 20 rounds. Definitely a lot easier to get to 3 QB, 3 tight ends with those 2 extra picks. But in Best Ball Mania, yes. And this is a room where it makes sense, where we had to get out in front of the wide receiver avalanche early. You know, we hammered Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Treylon Burks, and Kadarius Toney in rounds 2 through 6. And then we found ourselves in the spot where the best picks available were then all running backs. Then we rattled off 4 straight running back picks in round 7 through 10. JK Dobbins, James Cook, Rashad Penny, Antonio Gibson. This to me feels like quintessential giving what the room or taking what the room gives us. Although, as I say that, we did pass on some extreme tight end values, and knowing that maybe for this specific room, it was tapping into the job security and the roles that the tight ends and quarterbacks provided us from rounds 13 and on.
I have to say, I really like the teams that are built like this. And I think that there is the potential for very justified pushback. You drafted a regular season team. And I mean, we've seen some really good regular season teams. I mean, King Cap's $1 million team. You know, if you do that part of it, then you're still a millionaire. Now the mix is a little bit different this year, I think, but I like to think in terms of building the perfect regular season team first, and then thinking through what I think the realistic upside for some of these guys are. Because if we think of Howell and Mac Jones as actually deserving picks that are on the back end of the QB window, and one of the things that the RC will tell you throughout the years is the QB window dominates, but also you get great value and you're able to do so many other things if you're hitting the back end of that window. And if we think of those guys as players who should be ranked there, but we're getting discounts on, then it all comes together for you. And then the other thing, I actually like the playoff element with it. There are trade-offs between 2 QB and 3 QB, both for the regular season and for the playoffs. You're obviously losing the chance to hit on an additional player at running back or wide receiver to get that spike week that puts you over the top. And yet there are more different elements that you can build in when you have 3 quarterbacks. And there are more different games that you could win through. And that part of it's something that obviously Pat did last year. I think that this team is built in a way that is similar in, I mean, if you like the guys. So we also reach on Tyquan Thornton and Curtis Samuel by ADP, but within the context of how this draft went and within the context of where I think those guys should actually be ranked, then you feel pretty good about it. I also think that it's much easier to reach on Thornton and Samuel if you're set at running back. Whereas if you take an early QB and early tight end and you're not set at running back, you have to take the good running back values in that range. You can't get those wide receivers. And then you're looking at wide receivers in rounds 15, 16, 17 that, I mean, they could hit. They could be that guy with the spike week, but we're going to get so much more information later that the people drafting in August are going to have such a huge advantage on us if we go that route. I don't think that they have an advantage on us in nearly the same way if we go this route.
I'm going to recap the full team here. 3-5-7-3 build. Russell Wilson, Sam Howell, Mac Jones. Running back, CMC, JK Dobbins, James Cook, Rashad Penny, Antonio Gibson. Wide receivers, Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Treylon Burks, Kadarius Toney, Tyquan Thornton, Curtis Samuel, Greg Dulcich, Irv Smith, Mike Gesicki. We have a ton of correlation throughout this as well, playing for that New England Buffalo game with the Dobbins bring back. Of course, the Washington San Francisco game with Christian McCaffrey anchoring that one. And then Russell Wilson to Dulcich with Keenan Allen coming back. We also have Olave and Godwin going against each other. We have Kadarius Toney and Irv Smith going against each other. All kinds of correlation here. I have to ask, Shawn, when you pushed us to James Cook at pick 91, and I feel like I know the answer to this, was in the back of your head, this is definitely a Tyquan Thornton, Mac Jones, Mike Gesicki team?
One of the reasons I love Cook is that I love the late Patriots. And so you're thinking, I mean, how can I get a value on a Bills player? Because, I mean, Diggs and Gabe Davis are just such terrible picks in isolation. But they work very nicely if you have everything set up, because you want exposure to the really high scoring offense. I think that Cook is a great pick in isolation, who then, when you think about what you're trying to do with the Patriots, I mean, he becomes one of my favorite picks in all of these drafts. And so it's almost a matter of like, where can you avoid him so you don't have too much?
Yeah, and that it does work out nicely there. I think at one point, Dalton Kincaid was sitting around at the top of our queue, but I do really like how this draft broke out. And I do think this would be a funny one for people to see the screenshots of these picks. And you're like, okay, you big reach there, or holy cow, Dobbins fell here. But when you look at it in totality, it definitely tells a story, and it definitely leans into correlation. And the guys we are reaching on, Tyquan Thornton, Curtis Samuel, I mean, we're making big bets, not only on their teams, their offenses, those passing games, but also on those week 17 games, right? So if you're going to go and get your guys, you better be building as if you're right for the team level scenarios and their week 17 matchups.
I love it. And I do think that that's an extra feature of going at it this way that people might not be thinking about, where if you're doing a little bit of a unique approach structurally, how can you amplify that by making the other parts, the other tournament elements really work in your favor? If people are going to be concerned that you're not set up properly for the tournament without the elite QB, or even, any high QB without the elite tight end, how do you flip that on its head and actually build out so that you have a perfect tournament team as opposed to the other way around?
Shawn, tell people a little bit more about the underdog workshop you have going up on the site right now. Like I said, I binged those articles last night. How to combine hyper fragile running back and elite QB for a contrarian juggernaut. If there's anyone who is not afraid to stare down some of these wide receiver heavy rooms and get unique builds, it's you, and you lay out kind of a path of how to pull that off in this piece.
Right. So actually look back through all the way through 2015, talk about how ADP and the specific scoring environments of individual years work out to create where we are now. We look back at 2022, what worked then. There are some specific elements that carry over to 2023, but we also want to think from an even bigger picture than that. So I go through and say, if this is a year where you're basically making two conjectures, one, that the elite QB element, even at the higher prices that you referenced, that's still going to be a thing. And then number two, maybe this is a year like 2016, or maybe just the huge move in ADP moves us in the direction where a hyper fragile team works. You combine those two things, what else would you have to do to make it work? And one of the things, just like we just did with our team, to make that work, you have to have then all of those additional wide receiver picks. I think if you have this elite QB with hyper fragile, then some of the later wide receivers do get a little bit more interesting. If you're doing both week 16 and week 17 game stacks, you're having the QBs fully stacked up. So you're maximizing the value of those wide receivers, but also you have very specific running back profiles that you're chasing. And I mean, we barely missed, arguably, on some crazy running back values. I think Ken Walker would have been one potential one there. Gibbs would have been one. Pete, what are your thoughts on that part of it? Do you have, I mean, the team worked out perfectly, I think, from my perspective. And you look at just like where we took Kadarius Toney. If we had taken any other running back, you're not going to have enough wide receiver firepower. But is there any regret that we didn't pull the trigger on Gibbs or that Walker didn't make it to us?
I might have had it, but I felt like we had three versions of that pick, right? And the values got even bigger as you went along, in that, Gibbs was a little bit of a slider, Walker, pretty big slider. And then we did get it with Dobbins. And so I feel like our patience was rewarded. I think both of us prefer Kenneth Walker to JK Dobbins in a vacuum, but in that scenario of making sure we didn't get buried, and the fact that we were able to get Kadarius Toney at ADP kind of in a crazy wide receiver room, I do think kind of justified pushing it there. And then knowing, hey, these next four picks were all running backs, where the running backs were the best pick on the board. So I like how we played it there. And I want to give just another plug here. Check out Shawn Siegele's author page, all of the great work over at Rotoviz. I got the link down below in the YouTube description there. Got the underdog workshop going. Also, if you guys are dynasty heads, Shawn has some awesome dynasty workshops up there as well. I also think I'm going to be going in the lab here soon with Michael Dubner to make another best ball video for 2023. Getting excited about that. A few other plugs, as always, guys. I know a lot of you are new to best ball. I've actually been getting comments for the longest time. I always was just all of you sickos who draft year round. You know the deal. But now there are some new ones for you guys here. If you are jumping in on Underdog, you can get up to a $100 deposit match with promo code Pete here. And also, I will be drafting tonight, as mentioned, with Pat and Ben Gretsch on ship chasing. We will be back as well for, I'll be drafting here in an hour and a half on the Swolecast as well. So, Shawn, I'm drafting around the clock. What other things can people look forward to over at Rotoviz this week?
We're going to have more content on some of those other topics that you also mentioned. We're looking at some of the elements with the FFPC, how to beat their tournaments. There are some subtle differences that I think people may not play up enough. We'll have workshops there. We're going to have more workshops on the RB Triflex format over at the FFPC with Dynasty format that we love. And then Colin Kelly and I have new shows out for Rotoviz Overtime as well. One of those that was a lot of fun was looking at the MFL 10 of Death, a Pat Thorman creation with a lot of the best analysts in the business, looking at some of the flag plant picks and looking at some of the different structures. Some drafters leaning into zero RB, a few drafters leaning into hyper fragile. Surprisingly enough, I mean, balanced is not particularly popular because there are some weaknesses to balance. So I think that was an interesting look. Yeah, it seems like June should be the break time, but Pete, I've got like 10 articles bouncing around in my head that I want to write simultaneously. That's pretty hard to do, but there's going to be a lot of fun stuff.
I know. I love it too. And, every time you do a draft, right, the juices get flowing again. Oh, here's another angle to write about. So yes, very much looking forward to that. As always, these drafts on my YouTube are eligible for my giveaway that I'm going to do when we hit 15,000 subs on the channel. We are chugging along at a great pace, almost to 13.8 here. So very shortly, we'll be only 1,200 subs away. How you get entered in that giveaway is leaving a comment on the stream the second the show is ended. I have also created a playlist for all of my Best Ball Mania stream drafts. You can find that playlist. Every single one of those videos is eligible for an entry via comment. I've seen some people going back, watching them from the beginning, leaving comments. Knock yourself out. Made it very easy for you with the playlist. One other plug too, over on Fantasy Life, yesterday, I wrote up a Best Ball Mania 4 trends piece looking at the falling elite quarterback prices, looking at a tight end dead zone forming with some tight end fallers, and then also looking at some of those RB2s who are screaming up draft boards like a Jerome Ford, like a Jalen Warren. So be sure to check that out. I will catch you guys later for the drafts. For Shawn, for Pat Kerrane, this is Best Ball Breakfast. We'll see you guys next time.